Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another postgame show. The Lakers won 125-101 tonight to improve to 20-10, jump back up to number 4 in the West. This was the Lakers' first win by double digits since November 30th against the New Orleans Pelicans nearly a month ago, and what at the time was the final win of their 7-game win streak. So this has been a very up and down month for the Lakers, to say the least, but they bounced back. They returned to form. Message received from JJ Redick and the coaching staff to the group, at least for one night against one of the worst teams in the NBA. But Lakers cannot control who they're playing next. They just play the schedule in front of them, and they took care of business tonight. And it was nice to see a blowout win. In my opinion, their first true blowout win since that blowout win over the Clippers on November 25th. So from that perspective, first blowout win in over a month. But before we get into it, a big shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. It was also the Lakers' first time leading at halftime since December 4th. And they are now 12-0 this season when leading at halftime, which is the best record in the NBA. So JJ Redick was in a good mood at halftime for the first time in a while. YT Burt notes, first game winning every quarter this season. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that could be right. There could be a game that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. I mean, the Lakers don't have a lot of 20-plus point wins. Quickly going through the schedule here, the 24-point win against Milwaukee was their first 20-point win of the season. And then since then, this is actually their second 20-point win of the season, and both of their 20-point wins have been by 24. So this tied a season high in terms of point differential, or margin of victory for the Lakers. I will be talking Nick Smith. He will be in one of the takeaways and, of course, the notable performers section. But without further ado, let's get into the breakdown of the game. So Buha's big picture off of tonight is a much needed return to form. And as I just threw out a bunch of different firsts in nearly a month, in terms of, in my opinion, first blowout win in over a month, first double-digit win in nearly a month, and first time winning at halftime. I mean, that one to me is actually kind of the craziest, because we know the Lakers have not blown out a lot of teams. They've not had a lot of double-digit, or again, as we just noted, only 2 20-plus point wins this season, but not leading at halftime since December 4th in Toronto. That was pretty wild to me, because they've obviously won games since then, but they've always been, or typically been down at halftime because of a lot of the slow starts, especially in the first quarter. So it was nice and refreshing to see LA. Wasn't quite a wire-to-wire win, because they lost the starting minutes to start the game. And then from that point on, really took control and were basically up the rest of the way. So, but close to a wire-to-wire win, I would say, because they did get off to a nice little start. Then Sacramento went on a run. Then they pulled the starters, and then from that point on, they were in control basically outside. I mean, there was maybe one point where Sacramento got it like close to on the double figure part. I'm not, maybe second quarter, I forget, but then LA took care of business from that point on. So just a really, I think, again, refreshing, close to wire win for the Lakers. And they've had performances like this for quarters or for halves or for part of a game, and then they let go of the rope at some point and the lead diminishes, and that's frankly where some of their crunch time success has been blowing certain leads, where they then go on to close it out in crunch time. But it could have been a blowout win. It could have been a larger win. And tonight was just consistent, and there was a lot to be impressed by. In my opinion, this was one of their, probably a top 3 defensive performance of the season for the Lakers. This was definitely their best defensive performance of the month, and probably their best defensive performance since the Milwaukee game. just, wire to wire, like full 48. This was probably their best defensive performance since the Milwaukee game, which is going on well over a month ago. So that was really encouraging. Then you couple that with, as friend of the show Kranjis noted on X, this was LA's highest offensive organization rate of the second highest of the season, and I believe the first time they went 60+% in all 4 quarters this season, first time since December 2024, over a year ago. So the offensive organization tonight, it really stood out early. Lakers were running a lot of double drag with Luka, running a bunch of stack action as well, running some weak side pin downs for LeBron to get into the paint to create mismatches. I thought they were spamming the right mismatches. The Kings have small guards, and that can be an advantage for the Lakers, especially when, with the exception of Keon Ellis, most of their guards are, Dennis is a solid defender. Russ can compete on that end, and Malik Monk is overall a minus defender, but there was some clear physical limitations that the Lakers were able to exploit with mismatches or manipulating the floor to get one of those guards as like the low man, rotating over to a big or rotating over to a cutter. And LA really exploited Sacramento's odd defensive game plan from Sacramento. I don't want to get too much into their side of things. I mean, they're just not a good basketball team. They have been playing a little bit better lately, but for the season, they are bottom 3 in both sides of the ball. So this is statistically, a bottom 3 team this season. So this is the type of performance you wanted to see LA have, coming off of losing 3 straight, coming off of losing 6 of 10, and being publicly called out by their coach. And again, I want to highlight the defensive end because I'm just going to spoil my stat of the night right now, but LA had 14 steals tonight. And of note, that tied their season high. It was their most steals in a game since November 2nd against Miami, but it was the first time they had double-digit steals since the game in Phoenix that they won. Remember the 24-0 run that they went on late in the third into the fourth. Several steals in that one, and that led to 13. But before that, the last time they had 13 steals in a game, or even double digits, was the Milwaukee game when they had 13 steals. So they went nearly a month in between double-digit steal performances from the Milwaukee game to the Phoenix game, and then they went another couple weeks until this game. So really, over the past 6 weeks or so, the Lakers have had double-digit steals twice. And that's not the end-all, be-all defensively, but one thing I talked about with this group earlier in the season, when they were playing better defensively and when they were closer to a league average defense, is this is a group that, like, every team has strengths. Even if you're bad on one side of the ball, you have strengths on one side of the ball. And one of LA's primary strengths is the defensive playmaking that they have. And guys like Luka, even guys like Luka and LeBron, who their defensive focus and effort and urgency can wane, those guys are effective off-ball defenders, especially with playing passing lanes and reading the defense. So those guys can get deflections and steals, as we saw tonight. But then obviously the Banshees with Jared Vanderbilt, Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, Gabe Vincent when he's back, like those guys can all create turnovers and wreak some havoc and get out in transition. So the Lakers defense, I've called it sort of like, compared it to some of those NFL defenses where there are some NFL defenses that are bad, but are high in turnover rate. And it's sort of like you're either going to score a touchdown on the defense, or you're going to give up a pick six, or you're going to give up an interception. And that very much is like the Lakers defense. It's like, if you can war of attrition them, if you can grind them down, you will likely score, right? And that's what we've seen some teams do to them lately with the offensive rebounding and just a certain level of physicality on the offensive end. But if you're going to be careless with the ball or allow LA to speed you up, as I thought Sacramento did, and of course LA deserves a lot of credit for that, that's where it can generate, the Lakers defense can generate a lot of turnovers. And that is one of their strengths on the defensive end, is they can turn you over, they can speed you up, and that can then turn into transition opportunities, which I thought they did a solid job of tonight. Like, there were some sloppy transition plays that they certainly could clean up, but ultimately didn't matter. But I do want to quickly reference something I said off of the last stream coming off of the Houston game and expound upon this a little bit more, just because I said, I don't care if the Lakers come out and beat the Kings by 50. It's not going to change how I view this team. And they did not come out and beat the Kings by 50, though, by beating them by 24. That's, again, tied for a season high in margin of victory. I still stand by that statement. What I will note is I did like the spirit from this group, and it did feel like guys were locked in defensively at a level that we just haven't really seen recently. And I want to point out LeBron and Luka specifically. I thought both of those guys largely did their jobs tonight. That they were not perfect, right? Like DeMar DeRozan was targeting Luka. He hit several jumpers over Luka. LeBron had his times where he gave up offensive rebounds or was beaten off the dribble. But for the most part, I thought this was a pretty low mistake effort from LA defensively. And that was what ultimately led to, like, Sacramento's not a team that turns the ball over much. They had 19 turnovers individually. Let's see, as a team, I would assume they had more. Yeah. Oh no, 19 as a team overall. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that was LA's 14 steals. And I just thought it was like, I still think this team, at least in my opinion, should be judged on their performances against OKC and San Antonio and Houston and Denver, because that is like, they could be undefeated against the rest of the league. If they can't beat those teams, they're not getting out of the West. They're not winning multiple playoff series in the West, right? So I'm going to weigh those performances much stronger than I'm going to weigh a performance like tonight. However, to a point I made earlier in the show, like, the Lakers don't have a lot of impressive blowout wins. This is only their second 20-plus win of the season. So I do want to acknowledge, like, the progress or the step in the right direction we saw tonight. And now this could be all for nothing if they come out and lay an egg against Detroit. Like, if they lose by 20 to Detroit, who just got their butts kicked tonight by the Clippers, and I think that will be a motivating factor for them against the Lakers. Like, if that obviously changes the tune a bit, but assuming they can use this as something of a launch pad and move forward with a little bit more urgency and focus, I think then this was a nice win, right? Again, in terms of opponent, this is one of the worst teams in the league. They're also without two of their three best players in Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine. They've been playing a little bit better lately. They've been a little feisty, but this is not a good team. But again, like, the Lakers, they couldn't pick who their next opponent was going to be. All they could do was come out and take care of business. They did that tonight. And for a team that has struggled to put together multiple quarters in a row, two halves in a row, a full or close to full 48 minutes of good basketball, this was as close as maybe they've been all season, with the exception of the Milwaukee game. So I don't want to be a downer here on that note, right? Like, of course, I still, like, I've not forgotten about the Houston game. I've not forgotten about the San Antonio game. I've not forgotten about the Phoenix game. That is still fresh in my memory. And I still have a big pause right now with comparing this team to the top teams in the West. But for now, with the new information we have, this was a nice win. They blew a team out, one of their best two-way performances, if not arguably their best of the season. And we move forward with the new information and see how they play against Detroit. In terms of notable performers, have to start with Luka Doncic. 34 points on 11 of 23 shooting, 5 of 14 three-point shooting, 7 of 8 at the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, 5 turnovers, and 3 fouls. For Luka, I thought this was one of his better recent performances. I don't think he's quite back to the level of earlier in the season, but especially compared to the last two, I mean, he nearly outscored his two prior performances. Granted, the Clippers early, but just like, that was not a good game for him. The Houston game was not a good game for him. The Utah game was a good game, although a bit of a slow start in that one. And then you get back to, like, the Phoenix game, the San Antonio game weren't his strongest performances. So I think this is Luka's best or second best game since returning from his nearly week-long absence earlier in the month. And I thought that the shot selection was largely where you wanted it to be. I've said before, once he's cracking that, like, 11, 12 plus 3-point attempts, I think he's got to be hitting more than 2 or 3 of them. I think he's got to be at least in that 4 or 5 range. Tonight he hit 5. So again, like 14 is still probably a little bit too rich for my blood. I thought there was a couple of contested step backs he took that were a bit out of rhythm. He probably could have just not taken, but he hit 5, so I'm not going to nitpick there. And I thought, again, as I mentioned earlier, the defensive, like he had several possessions where he's picking up Keon Ellis or Russell Westbrook at the free throw line, extended on the opposite side, like 75 feet, right? And you never see Luka pick up 75 feet. So it wasn't every possession. And again, that there were times like they were clearly trying to target Luka and Rui with DeMar DeRozan because the Lakers eventually switched Rui off of him and they were targeting him. And with Luka, they were trying to bring him into the fray. But Luka held his own on some of those possessions. And I thought the defensive execution from him tonight was much better than it's been recently. Next player, LeBron James, 24 points on 11 of 13 shooting, his best shooting performance as a Laker. I think that's like 82, 83%, something like that. Might even be 84, somewhere in that 82 to 84% range. 1 for 2 on threes. So one thing I really liked about LeBron's offensive attack tonight was just not taking threes. Like LeBron's 3-point shot has not been falling consistently. And I liked that he played primarily inside the arc. So if we actually apply this just inside the arc, LeBron went 10 for 11, which is amazing. Only 1 free throw, and he was upset by that and felt he should have been going to the free throw line more. But we talk about that a bit. Only 3 rebounds for LeBron. That's like one area that I think could be better, but with him more recently, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 turnovers, but just an uber efficient night from LeBron. And again, I thought the Lakers were doing a really good job of trying to bring in Russ or Schroeder or some of the smaller Kings guards, even Keon Ellis, and trying to target mismatches with LeBron in the post. He had some transition buckets, some cuts, and also, as I mentioned earlier, coming off of some weak side pin downs. So just a really impressive performance from LeBron. And he continues to look better on the offensive end. I thought the defensive effort was better tonight. But Detroit's going to be a real test for not only him, but the entire Lakers front line and their defensive rebounding. Detroit is very similar to Houston. So he will be immediately tested in a lot of the ways that Houston tested them. DeAndre Ayton, 11 points, 11 rebounds, a couple of assists, a couple blocks, 5 for 9 shooting. I thought, a solid game for DA. Was mainly involved as a lob threat and in the pick and roll. You got a couple of post up deep seal opportunities, but not many of them. I was interested to see how his role shifted with no Austin, but they didn't really involve him much more. Rui got the start, which I will be touching on in a second, but 12 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, had 2 points in the first half, 10 points in the second half. So a much more backloaded offensive performance for Rui. I think we continue to see the limitations with him as a starter and him as a wing stopper. They started him on DeRozan. He scored on Rui multiple times. They eventually made the switch off of Rui being the primary guy, put Marcus on, especially in the second half. And then they were still trying to spam, where's Rui, where's Luka, how can we bring them into the fray? So I think defensively overall, I thought he had some nice, like they started putting him on Russ and having him as more of a roamer. The issue is that's also the best way to use LeBron and the best way to use Luka. So there continues to be overlap there defensively. But I thought, he had some nice help possessions. And I thought offensively, like once they started to spam, like Luka had a couple of those laser corner kicks that he has. Rui missed one, made another one. Then he got out in transition a couple times. And then he also, they ran a couple of, weak side pin downs for him. And he was he curled off one and scored. He also had a little drive, nice pull up. So the Lakers got him a bit more involved. He took 10 shots tonight. So I thought that was nice to see on the offensive side. Defensively, I think they continue to play him out of position largely. And again, it's not really on Rui, but I will get into that a little bit more in one of my takeaways. Off the bench, we have to talk about Nick Smith Jr. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more in one of my takeaways, but 21 points on 8 for 14 shooting, 5 for 10 3-point shooting. This dude is just instant offense. And it's not every night, right? It's not every opportunity, but he has done it consistently enough. And I thought one thing that really stood out to me pregame was when JJ was talking about potentially changing up the starting lineup or the rotation or whatever, he highlighted Nick Smith Jr. as a guy who is going to get more opportunity. And I think we saw that tonight. He was the third leading scorer. He actually took more shots than LeBron. Was second on the team in field goal attempts. And I think there's a real opening and opportunity here for him to be more involved offensively, because I was wondering if this was going to be more of a by committee thing, and it still could be, right? It's one game. We have one data point here, but I was thinking, okay, maybe a little bit more Ayton, a little bit more Rui, a little bit more Marcus, a little bit more Jake, Gabe when he comes back, a little bit more him, and like collectively, everybody combines to replace the 26.5 points that Austin is averaging. But it was almost not a like for like, right? Because Smith at 21 only had 1 assist. Like he's much more of just a pure scorer, bucket getter. He's not playmaking or running the offense to the same degree, but his pull up 3-point shooting, he hit the one catch and shoot that was pretty deep, like 27, 28 feet. Then hit his pull up 3-point shooting, including in transition. Like he could just pull up, let it fly, but also getting downhill and finishing at the rim. Like he's in a lot of ways like what the Lakers have needed from Marcus and Jake and Dalton and Gabe. Like one of those four, I mean, they've all had their opportunities to do stuff like this, and none of those four have been able to do it consistently. But just being that sort of wild card in the rotation of any given night, I could drop 15 or 20. And I know a lot of fans have wanted the Lakers to trade for that type of player, with Malik Monk on the other side being the prime example. But tonight, at least, it's one game. But tonight, Nick Smith just straight up outplayed Malik Monk. Nick Smith is a two-way player. He's not even on the official roster. But again, I want to touch on him a little bit later, so I'm not going to spoil that. But just an awesome off-the-bench performance for Nick Smith, and he's now done this several times this season. And I think he could have a real role here as long as Austin is out. Jake LaRavia had some nice drives, showed some aggression, continues to struggle with the finishing. There's that one sequence or that one possession where he drives. He has a point-blank layup. He misses it, and then while it's on the rim, Vando tips it in. Offensive goaltending. Jake's got to make that shot. 0 for 3 on threes, but did get to the free throw line, had a couple of and ones, made all his free throws tonight. So I thought there was a downhill force and just like a focus on attacking closeouts that I really liked from Jake LaRavia. Would still like to see him let it fly a little bit more, but 2 steals, 1 block, 5 fouls. At least there was some physicality and aggression there from him on that end. Like I thought the defensive performance was really, really solid from him tonight. And then final couple guys, Vando, 5 points, 2 for 4 shooting, 1 for 3 on threes, did airball and then missed the other one badly, but did hit another 3. So he continues to be more of a threat out there, which is a promising sign. Did miss a point blank attempt and have another couple turnovers. So like I thought tonight what was more of a normal and like realistic Vando performance in terms of he's not going to hit multiple threes every night. And he's not always going to be like this double-digit scoring threat, but he did just enough offensively. And you want to be careful with him having the ball in his hands because he's liable to just he and Marcus are cut from the same cloth in some ways in terms of the decision making, where I leave myself like scratching my head sometimes with the passing decisions, but. 2 steals and like he's just a force out there, and the ferocity that he plays with defensively, and these little things in terms of stunting on drives and recovering out to either contest the shooter or even intercept the pass or deflect the pass. Like he's just everywhere. And I thought one thing they did tonight was deploy him more at the point of attack, which I liked. And this was a certainly a matchup he could be deployed more at the point of attack, but then they also put him at on DeRozan later in the second half. So you saw his defensive versatility, and just Vando continues to establish himself as a key piece in the rotation. Tonight he was he was 3rd in bench minutes, but he played more than Marcus actually. So he was 7th on the team in minutes, and like this is kind of where he's at. Like I clearly Nick Smith and JJ's looking for some offense. So I think Nick Smith is and potentially Gabe when he comes back are going to have a certain role. But Vando is like right there as somewhere between the 8th to 9th man right now, and that's progress from where he was at as recently as a couple weeks ago or so. And then Maxi Kleba, I thought it was a pretty rough performance from him, and I think really it's more so the offensive end. I think he's held up fine defensively. He has good technique, relatively good footwork, despite having clearly lost a step physically. But he's just like a technically sound and savvy defender, and he does little things in terms of his spacing, his screening, his cutting, just the timing on some of those things. I think goes a bit unnoticed. However, he's just not an offensive threat right now. And it's to the point where it's becoming a bit detrimental. And obviously he's only playing because Jackson Hayes is out, but the Lakers really need Jackson Hayes back. And I think that will balance out the rotation a bit. In terms of stat of the night, I already mentioned it, 14 steals, tied for a season high and most steals in a game since November 2nd. So I'll breeze through that one. Takeaway number 1 is JJ sticks with the same starting lineup. So after all of the talk post game about uncomfortable truths and holding guys accountable and wanting to not put up with certain things for the final 53 games, he walks it back basically at practice and downplays the sentiment coming out of that. And it was like, well, the truth is uncomfortable. So, I mean, that was not what he said. He reframed the conversation. And then he also went very positive coming out of practice, but not really like he almost acted like his post game, going scorched earth didn't happen, which I get to an extent. You don't want to belabor that. You don't want to be like harping on it too much, but I think it just felt like he tried to paper over it or gloss over it rather than actually address it. And I mean, look, as I said at the top, the message was received. The Lakers clearly had a better effort tonight and a more sustained effort than most of their performances this season. So that's a notable step in the right direction for a group that has been inconsistent, has let go of the rope, has taken their foot off the gas. But I'm still in astonishment that he refuses to change the starting group. And so for the game, they went +8 in 12 minutes. And just to be clear here, he went with the same starting group. He closed the second half with against Houston, where DA, LeBron, Rui, Marcus, and Luka, that group got killed in the Houston game. If you remember, they were down, I believe, 11 against Houston. And then in the blink of an eye, they were down 20 to start the third quarter. And that was with that group out there specifically. And they actually start this game -1 against the Kings starters in the first 5 minutes. Then they make a sub. Then they go on a run. They go back to the group for a little bit there in the second quarter. And then again of course, coming out of halftime, they end as a +8 in 12 minutes, which is solid, right? Like, I think in the context of, you see the starting groups overall ±, 4 of the 5 guys were +20 or better. Like, that kind of shows you, the +8 was nice, but like they were winning when it was 2 Banshees out there. And that continues to be the thing for me, that like LA keeps winning in spite of the starting lineup, not because of their starting lineup. And I think that the truly great teams or really the elite teams in the NBA right now are winning because of their starting lineup and because of their bench. But the Lakers are the exception right now, where they, even tonight was like, again, solid, like +8 in 12 minutes. You'll take that. I think based on the caliber of opponent, though, based on the caliber of opponent starting lineup. And also, one thing I haven't even mentioned yet, Sacramento was technically on the second night of a back-to-back. And I don't want to make excuses for the Sacramento side, but like clearly this group, just like the Lakers, when they're on the second night of a back-to-back, like there is an element of fatigue. There's an element of like, you don't quite have it the same as like the first night. So that, like, the fact that they were treading water primarily against that group and then did have some separation in the third quarter, I thought it was a solid performance. I wouldn't say it was a good performance, and I would certainly not say it was a great performance. And again, I just think there's a clear defensive limitation in the middle of the lineup, where the Luka, LeBron, Rui combination, the Lakers are going to switch that, but you're just causing a lot of problems there with the communication, with the help side, and with the overall focus and effort and energy from that trio in especially in a lot of these big matchups, right? Like one thing to do it against Sacramento, but I'm interested to see how that lineup does against Detroit. However, I will actually now make a counterpoint and make the defense of the decision from JJ to some extent in terms of, I think when healthy, the ideal or like the realistic outcome here is one Banshee, 3 offensive-minded perimeter players, and 1 center. Now, when they're at full strength, the 3 offensive-minded perimeter players are Luka, Austin, and LeBron. The Banshee should be Marcus or a wing TBD, and then in the center is DeAndre Ayton. Technically, this alignment keeps that theoretical alignment alive in terms of Marcus is the Banshee, Luka, LeBron, and now Rui are the 3 offensive-minded perimeter players, and then you have DeAndre Ayton as the center. So as long as this leads to Austin coming back and replacing Rui, I'm okay with it for now. I don't love it. I don't really quite like it either, but they got the results tonight. They won the game. It was a positive, albeit not as convincing as some of the other primary lineups tonight. But the one theoretical argument you can make in JJ's favor is like, all right, don't upset the apple cart with Rui yet. You're keeping this like offensive minded 3 guys plus a Banshee plus a center. But if Austin comes back and he replaces Marcus and it just goes back to the status quo, that's when I will begin beating this drum. Now, for the record, in my opinion, I think Vando should just replace Rui. And I think this is going to lead me to the new rotation. I'm really coming around to this idea, and I've mentioned it now the last couple of games, of 2 stars or even like a Nick Smith Jr. as one of the ball handlers, like 2 offensive-minded guys who could create their own shot at a high level with like Luka and Nick Smith, LeBron and Nick Smith, 2 Banshees, and then a center. And I thought those groups were awesome tonight and have been awesome recently, where when you put 2 Banshees out there, it just changes the effectiveness of the defense. And especially if it's if it's Marcus and Vando, or even like Marcus, Vando, and Jake, all of a sudden you are wreaking havoc defensively. Now you can go through some offensive lulls, and that is the obvious concern with playing the Banshees together. But I thought tonight there was a clear shift towards that. The primary adjustment that JJ teased pregame that he ended up doing was Luka typically plays the full first quarter. Sometimes they'll occasionally pull him with like 30 seconds or a minute left, but for the most part, he plays the entire first quarter. They pulled him with about 3 minutes left, or after the game, JJ said that's the goal, is they're going to pull Luka with 3 minutes left in the first, bring LeBron back, and they're more so staggering LeBron and Luka while Austin is out to ensure that one of the 2 is on the floor at all times. Because with Austin, you can stagger it where all 3 are on, at least one of the 3's on, and then sometimes 2 of the 3. But it's harder to do with only 2 of those guys. And it's clear that the plan is like start games with those 2, go most of the middle of the half without them, and then close the half with them, or obviously close the game with them. But this new rotation of shifting toward 2 offensive players, with again, right now being Luka, LeBron, and Nick Smith, is pretty crazy. We're talking about Nick Smith in this light, but like he's had multiple, again, 20+ point games. Like 2 creators / playmakers / scorers, 2 Banshees, which to me would constitute Marcus, Vando, Gabe when he's back. And then, I guess, I mean, that's kind of it right now. Maxey has had some, Jake too. So Jake, Vando, Marcus, and Gabe, I think, are the 4 Banshees. Maxey's had some Banshee moments, but I think in the bigger picture, he's playing center and he'll be behind Jackson. And then Rui's the only non-Banshee perimeter player. I guess you could technically put him in the offensive bucket, where maybe it's like Luka and Rui are the pairing, LeBron and Nick Smith are the pairing. I actually like those 2 pairings a lot, specifically around like Banshees and centers. So the new rotation, I'm for it again. I think that the one thing I would change would be the starting group, but I think that is trending in the right direction. And I just, again, want to bring up Nick Smith Jr. because I thought the spark that he provided off the bench tonight was just like it swung parts of the game. And I think he has a real opportunity to earn a roster spot and have a Jordan Goodwin sized impact. Remember, this is about the time of last season when I think this was actually before Jordan Goodwin didn't even start playing consistently until I want to say like late January. It was like right before, maybe even early February. It was right before I think it was late January, around that time. So like this is even earlier than that, but I think Nick Smith has a chance to, instead of the Lakers going out and trading for that offensive scorer, they might just have that player here in Nick Smith off the bench and him being that wild card who could play 12, 15, 18 minutes a night and get hot and drop 12, 15, 18 points. So I think Nick Smith Jr. is the guy right now I'm looking at. Also, a belated, I didn't mention Marcus earlier. I should have given Marcus, like, I thought he brought the energy with the starting group, and it's clear that when he's out, Marcus does what Marcus does. But I want to give Marcus a belated shout out just because of he took one shot tonight. And he only played 20 minutes. JJ, I think, for whatever reason, played him fewer minutes. He had played, I believe, like 27 plus in each of the last 5. So tonight, they maybe because of how well Nick Smith played, they gave him a little bit more of rest, which can be good for Marcus, especially tonight when they didn't really like need him. But Marcus, only one shot. I do want to shout that out. And then third and final takeaway before we get into the Q&A, just a quick Keon Ellis scouting report. And, I like to do this when the Lakers play a potential trade target. So Keon Ellis, Lakers trade targets like never really have good games against them for whatever reason. I don't know if it's like the pressure of the spotlight of, hey, if I play well, maybe that bumps me up a little bit in the Lakers' eyes. But 22 minutes, 1 for 5 shooting, 2 points, 0 for 2 on threes, 1 block. I thought his defense on Luka was solid. Like he's not the ideal Luka defender. He's giving up a lot of size and strength and just overall like physicality in that matchup. I would like him much more on Austin, and I thought he's had some good moments against Austin the last couple of years. But that to me is more of a natural matchup for Keon than Luka. But I think that's worth noting just because if the Lakers were to potentially trade for Keon, he might be thrust into that role where I don't know if he's quite ready for that. Offensively, I don't want to take away like too much just because the Kings are a bit of a dumpster fire on offense. They're actually worse offensively than defensively. I believe they entered tonight as the 29th ranked offense. So this is a group that, despite having more offensive-minded players than defensive-minded players, they just can't score. And Keon is much more of a satellite player, right? He's much more of an ancillary player. So he's not going to really be creating offense that much for himself. He's much more of a, if the ball is moving and snapping, he's a guy that could benefit with catch and shoot threes or attacking closeouts or second side actions where he's not really a primary ball handler, especially in a lineup with Russell Westbrook and DeMar DeRozan. So not much to take away from him offensively. Like, didn't have a rebound. And again, it was not his best showing. I do like him more so in a bench role. I could envision him, like, he's a clear upgrade over Gabe, in my opinion, right? Like, there's a certain baseline level of defense that you get from him that doesn't show up in the box score that I thought, especially in the non-Luka matchups, like he was solid. So I do still like Keon Ellis, but I will say I do not think he is worth a first-round pick. I don't know if he's 5th starter caliber for LA. This was not his best showing, but I still like him, especially in a bench role. And if there was a way to maybe get a couple of seconds and trade like 2 to 3 seconds for him, I would be open to that. But I would not give up a first or even protected first for Keon Ellis. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Kalen Jones. Thank you for the super chat. Nick Smith should be and needs to be the backup point guard even when Gabe is back. Doesn't really D up to the level of Gabe, but is much more dependable offensively. He's done this before for us already as well. I agree with you. I think what's going to be interesting is how JJ ultimately views this and how he, because I think, to be clear, I think there is a bit more of a, I think there's a bit more of a gap between these two defensively than you are indicating. but the same thing can be said about them offensively. So it depends which way you want to lean. And right now, the Lakers, especially with Austin out, actually need a bit more offense as well. For the season, just comparing some of their numbers, and this was going into tonight, so Nick's numbers are going to sway a little bit. He's out shooting Gabe from the floor. He's out shooting Gabe on threes. He's out shooting Gabe on twos. And he's averaging more points per game than Gabe. They're pretty close, more rebounds by a little bit, negligible amount. Assists are basically tied, a little bit more steals. So, yeah, I mean, Nick Smith has been a better offensive player than Gabe Vincent this season. And of note with Nick Smith, like I just wanted to kind of remember and reminisce on some of these performances. You had the at Portland coming out party where he dropped 25 and hit several big shots down the stretch. But then at Toronto had 12, at Boston 13. That was in a blowout, so some of that was garbage time. But even more recently, like the Clippers game had 9, the Phoenix game had 12. So he's had, I mean, this was his second 20-point performance of the season, but he has had now 5 double-digit scoring performances and has done that basically, well, I was going to say anytime he's played 20 minutes. That's not true because he's played 20 minutes a few times and not done it. But like there is a dependability there that you just don't get with Gabe Vincent. So I agree with you. I will be honest, though. I'm a little nervous of what this is going to look like once Gabe returns because there's a clear like for like in terms of the rotation where Jackson's going to take the maxi minutes. That's easy. And that will be the full 48 with DeAndre and with Jackson. How Gabe factors into this, because again, like we've talked about Rui not necessarily performing at a starting level, and JJ continues to start him and play him a certain amount. Gabe has not performed at a rotation level consistently, and JJ continues to play him a certain amount. So I will admit some fear and some skepticism here in terms of JJ actually, it's not always a meritocracy. It's a selective meritocracy. Now I will note, he does tend to favor scoring and shooting, but at the same time, Nick Smith has never really been ahead of Gabe in the rotation this season. The one time, I mean, Nick got the start without Austin, and that, but that game, that was the Phoenix game, and there was no Gabe in that game. So I mean, we don't even know when Gabe's coming back. So I guess that's another factor here of we could talk about it. But Gabe's is. I think he's replaced Kendrick Nunn. I don't know if you guys agree with this. I'd be curious, but I think Gabe is officially past Kendrick Nunn as like the poster boy of Lakers injury reports that last longer than initially expected or like the initial timetable. Kendrick Nunn had that. He was the champion. He had the gold belt for a while. I think Gabe now, through repetition, through frequency, has been able to surpass Kendrick Nunn as the Laker of like the last half decade to hold up to the injury gods. Chuck Dangler, aka Fang Charlie. Not very often we see Buha so mad from your last video. Haha, glad to see this win though. Great game today. Please note I'm still waiting on your email. Appreciate it, Charlie, and I do have to get back to you on that. Yeah, I mean, look, I was upset because, I mean, don't get me started again after the Christmas game. I just thought it was an embarrassing loss, and it was the low point of the season. And this had also been something that was relatively predictable. I think it spiraled out of control even faster than I thought it could, but the Lakers had just not been playing well basically for the entire month, and they were doing very little in terms of changing the lineup, changing the rotation, schematic adjustments, and it just culminated in a really embarrassing 3-game stretch for them. So yeah, I think it also culminated in me going off in a way that I rarely go off. But I thought I just had a lot to say, and I was kind of tired of holding it in. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. I don't care about this win, not going to lie. JJ's situation is super weird. I think he's too friendly with players and very weak. How he just rolled over, troubling. I hear that, right? And that is, I I would say that's like a cousin to my point earlier about I don't care if they beat the Kings by 50. It doesn't change how I view them. I think, I was obviously exaggerating a little bit there, but I think the bigger thing for me coming off of this was like the consistent focus level throughout most of the game that the Lakers just have not had. And the fact that they had a convincing win, the fact that they tied their season high in margin of victory, that matters to me a little bit. Now, this does not, like, they just vaulted over Houston technically in the standings and have now one more win than Houston. I still think Houston's better than them as constructed. I still think Houston would convincingly, if they tipped off tomorrow and, like, let's just say Austin gets magically healthy, I still would pick Houston to beat them. So this does not sway how I view them against Denver or OKC or Houston or San Antonio. I'm still pretty close to 50-50. I think I lean Lakers against the Wolves specifically, but to me, they're still somewhere in that like 4 or 5 range in the West overall. And that has not, like, I do not have like more confidence in them all of a sudden. Now, what could change my opinion is if they beat Detroit. And if they beat Detroit, that to me would be, regardless of the context of the win, that would be the best win of the season in terms of opponent. Because I think technically right now San Antonio is the best win, like just based on pure opponent. But San Antonio didn't have Fox and Harper, and we've seen the moment they got De'Aaron Fox back, they have been arguably the best team in the NBA or in that conversation. So that Fox absence was pivotal for that matchup that the Lakers beat them in. And like San Antonio then versus now, just two totally different teams. So I think factoring it, like Detroit is the number 1 seed in the East. They've been playing at a certain level all season. They could be like a high 50s win team. And I think that would be the best win in terms of like caliber of opponent this season if the Lakers take care of business on Tuesday. But as far as JJ, yeah, I mean, I was pretty surprised by his response at practice. And to me, I always want to be careful with what I say and how I say things. And just to be clear, this is my opinion. This is my perspective. This is not sourced. This is not, I'm not saying any of the private conversations I've had. I'm not divulging any of that in terms of what was said or what happened. But I would say my read on it was there was some feedback that he received to kind of tone down the messaging. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know if that was higher up. I don't know if that was, I guess, like, I don't want to say the players are like below the coaching staff, but obviously the coach are in charge, the leaders. So like, I don't know if it came from the players. I don't know if it came from above him, but my sense was like, or maybe it just was self-reflection on his part. And he just realized, hey, you can only throw your team under the bus so many times. JJ has been increasingly throwing them under the bus. And maybe he realized, hey, like, I got to be careful with how I handle this. Otherwise I might lose the locker room or lose part of the locker room. So, but my read was like he made a very calculated decision based on either external feedback or just internal reflection, or maybe a combination of both, to soften his stance on that. Now, I get that to a degree, but I think there could have been a better way to handle addressing some of that stuff. Because again, I just thought, I don't like calling people weak or soft, so I'm not going to go like down that road. But what I will say is like, it felt like he wasn't standing on business. And I felt like that was a moment for him to stand on business, and you can stand on business and reframe it and present it in like a softer manner or a more player friendly manner. But he almost like just kind of ignored his previous comments, and to say like, because the uncomfortable thing, again, he changed the context of it. Like he was saying he was going to make guys uncomfortable. Like that was a very pointed, decision on his part to say it that way, to frame it that way, and then to walk it back in the manner that he did at practice. It was just, that was a little disappointing, because I think he could have stood on that and then been like, hey, maybe I misspoke or went a little bit too hard on the guys after. And, we had a conversation with it, but like, I needed to have, talk to player X or player, he's not going to name the players, but I just felt like it was clear how he truly felt was what we saw after the game. That was the heat of the moment, how JJ really felt about certain players and about the team's effort level. And then the version of him we saw at practice was not the same energy. And I felt like it seemed like he was kind of talked down or at least reflected on it and was like, I can't keep kind of approaching it this way. Which again, I'm not saying he had to come out and like hammer them again. I think that would have had diminishing returns at some point, but you could have stood on what you said and still changed the framing a little bit or been like, hey, I addressed it with the players that needed to hear it. I did make them uncomfortable in the meeting. We did hash it out. They also came at the coaching staff and like we talked that out and we're in a better place now. And that is like sort of what he said, but I thought, again, he basically like ignored a lot of what he said and acted like he didn't say it or like he didn't mean it. And that to me just took out a lot of, I don't know, it just took out a lot from what he said, despite him clearly meaning it. Like, I very much believe the guy we saw after that game more so than the guy we saw at practice. Ryan Lucas, thank you for the super chat. What about Dalton Maxey 2030 first swap for the Nets? Sharp, Cam Thomas, and Clowney. Clowney, young Jeremy Grant, Sharper Bruiser, Cam equals AR insurance. This is an interesting one. I will note, just in terms of my bias here, I am not a big Cam Thomas guy. I think that because, like, for example, if they trade for Cam Thomas, he's coming off the bench and like you're not starting Austin Reaves, Cam Thomas, and Luka Doncic. Like if you want the starting group to somehow get worse defensively, going from Rui to Cam Thomas is a giant down. Like for as bad and as frustrating as Rui's been defensively, going from Rui to Cam Thomas would be even more frustrating and even more flammable defensively. I like Sharp. I like Clowney. So that part of this I like. The Cam thing too, though, then you have to like, I'll just say this. I don't believe in Cam Thomas as a starter on a championship level team. To me, he's an elite sixth man who views himself as a star. And I think there's a real cognitive dissonance there. I could be wrong on that. And he could go on to be a star in a winning situation. But to me, there's much more like Jalen Green vibes or ultimately like to me, his future is being Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, Malik Monk, Jordan Clarkson. I think he's better than the last couple of guys, but closer to the Crawford Williams, and maybe he's better than all five of them at his peak ultimately. But it's still a bench scorer who's really limited defensively, has improved as a playmaker, but is still relatively limited. Not in that like I wouldn't even say he's consistently a good playmaker in my opinion. Could struggle with turnovers and decision making. So yes, he's a walking bucket. He could drop 40 at any given night. There's way more to the game though than that, and that's why, like, to me, he's a good stats. And I'm saying good stats lightly because his advanced metrics are not good, but a good stats bad team guy who he could drop 30 any given night. But I think AR to Cam, in my opinion, is a huge downgrade. I don't even think they're in the same. Shasta, I know you're saying it more in the sense of like, okay, if you trade Austin or maybe he leaves or something, you replace him with Cam. I would still want to bring Cam off the bench. There's no universe in which I would want Cam starting next to Luka. I think that like he's you want to be careful putting defensive liabilities next to Luka, right? In general, but like Cam to me is whatever that line is of like the bare minimum defender you could put next to Luka and still have like a coherent lineup rotation. I think Cam's below that. So I'm just being straight up about like, I'm not a Cam Thomas guy. So I might be the wrong person to ask here because I'm very out on him, especially in the context of like what I think he thinks he is and what I think he wants to be. I just don't see that in like a real, like just plop him in like OKC or Houston or Denver, or I think he's coming off the bench in all these situations and much more of, a 20 to maybe 25 minute a night guy. So I think that's more his destiny. If he's going to be on a good team, he could be on bad teams and drop 30 every night. And like, that's fine, but you're not going to win with Cam Thomas as your best or second best player, in my opinion. So, but I will say this to your point or to the question, I think the Nets are a team we have to factor in. They have a now, traded with the Lakers a couple times. And there's clearly a relationship between Rob Pelinka and Sean Marks. So the Nets can't be overlooked. And the general framework here, I'm open to. I would much prefer that. Like, if you could get Zaire Williams in here instead of Cam Thomas, I would much prefer that. That might change what you have to give up ultimately. But I'm just not a Cam Thomas guy. Rich, thank you for the super chat. One season is filled with ebbs and flows. One, and you're making 2 points here. There are 3 points. Point one, season is filled with ebbs and flows. Agreed. Two, can't bench Rui without affecting his trade value, right? I don't necessarily agree. I like maybe to a degree, but I think you're being a little generous here and assuming that the Lakers are going to trade him, or like, I'm not saying he's untradeable. I'm not saying they're not going to trade him, but I do think my read on the situation right now, I think it's with the coaching staff as well as the front office and just the organization overall. I think there's a gap in how the fan base and outside observers view Rui and how the people internally view Rui. I think they are much higher on him, both as like a starter and key core piece, and like also a longer term piece as a potential guy that they re-sign and can still extend until June 30th. So I think, like, technically, yes, maybe moving him to the bench alters his view or whatever. But I also think, like, in general, I think the Lakers are higher on Rui and would have a higher barometer or threshold to trade him rather than, or in comparison, rather, to like other teams, right? Like, I think, I think, like, for example, like a Herb Jones, I think if the Lakers offering Rui and Herb Jones, or Rui and a first for Herb Jones, I feel like in their head would be pretty close to even value. Whereas I think New Orleans would poo-poo that offer and think that's like far beneath Herb Jones's value. So like that's kind of the type of dissonance I think that's here. So it could certainly affect his trade value, but I don't even know how seriously Rui's being considered traded, which I think is an entirely different conversation for a later date. 3, if JJ stayed angry, it would have cost him the locker room. Yeah, I'm not saying that, again, to kind of close the loop on that point, I'm not saying JJ should have stayed angry. I think there was a way to like stand your ground on what you said but like soften the delivery, soften the like, hey, we talked it out, but XYZ, like I did deliver these uncomfortable truths. I did have a heart to heart with, the starter, right? Like you don't even have to name the guys, but if you say like the starters, I called, like each guy had whatever their moment on film and whatever, and like kind of address that. I think that would have held up better publicly. I just felt like it was like he went scorched earth and lit the team up. Like I've listened to multiple podcasts now where they're reading the direct quotes, and I obviously watch the presser, but like the direct quotes and hearing them multiple times in multiple contexts, it's like, it's pretty bad. Like JJ's probably now laid into the Lakers worse than any coach has laid into their team this season. There might be a presser I'm forgetting off the top of my head. I know like Chris Finch gets pretty fiery with Minnesota, but Ty Lue, I think has had 1 or 2 with the Clippers, but like JJ's laid into the Lakers as badly as anyone has laid into their team. And I just felt like he could have, again, like backed it up without it. Just, I don't know, it just came off to me very much as like he was trying to pretend, like sweep it under the rug, when it's like, dude, this has been a storyline for 48 hours. You can't just sweep this under the rug. You have to talk about this. And I felt like he just reframed the conversation in a way that I felt like wasn't truthful, in my opinion. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. JJ is the problem. He only plays Luka ball offensively. Defensively doesn't have a system. Hire Mike Malone. His experience with Jokic / Jamal Murray can help Luka / AR. So I think tonight, as I mentioned, and as Cran just was tweeting out, the offensive organization was much better tonight. And I thought there was less heliocentric basketball in general. Now, it was one game. It's one opponent. It's one of the worst defenses in the NBA. I'm as high level of a tactician as Kranjus is. He said, in his opinion, it was arguably the worst game plan he's seen against the Lakers this season, up there with New Orleans in terms of their defensive approach to LA's offense. So make of that what you will. I thought in general, like they were mixing up. I felt like they were hedging high and doubling and trapping a little bit more, allowing those 4-on-3, 3-on-2 opportunities. And we've seen teams actually play more in that deep drop and force Luka and Austin and LeBron to be more 2v2 creators. You didn't see that as much tonight. So yeah, I mean, I thought that the game plan from Sacramento wasn't great, but I thought that the offense though looked much better, and it was a nice reminder of what the Lakers can do offensively. I thought it was probably their second best offensive performance of the month. And then defensively, he has a system. I just think he doesn't have the personnel to run the system. And that's where, the switch everything and eventually the defense finds the matchup they want to exploit, or eventually it can be such a high effort defense that when you have players who are low motor, which is half the rotation, eventually they just stop focusing and stop trying as hard and stop rotating as hard. And that's where you get the consistent breakdown. So I like Mike Malone. I mean, Mike Malone is not a perfect coach. He had his flaws and clearly wore out his welcome in. I will note, JJ's presser was very Mike Malone coded, and Mike Malone loves throwing his team under the bus under a big loss. So you'd see more of that if they. I wouldn't mind Mike Malone as a assistant coach. It doesn't seem like he's interested in that. It seems like he's waiting for his next head coaching opportunity. But I think an interesting one for Mike Malone would potentially be Orlando, depending on what happens with Jamal Mosley, and if they lose in the first round again, maybe that's an opening there. Jeffrey, thank you for the super chat. When do you expect that we'll start seeing the trade activity pick up, January or closer to February 5th? Look, I believe the DFS trade was December 29th or 30th. So there's still a chance. I think the 31st and 1st people will like take off and not really conduct NBA business. But I think it probably mid-January. I'm a little surprised. Like you typically see 1 to 2 trades up to this point in the season, and we haven't seen any yet. So, but it is a really weird trade market. Like if you look at a lot of the names that are out there, there are certainly some stars, right? There's Anthony Davis. Now Trae Young is reportedly potentially on the block, and Memphis has been reluctant to give up Ja Morant, but does that change at some point? Like there are some big names, but then there's also not a lot of medium names, right? Like Herb Jones, we don't even know if Herb Jones is actually available. He might not be available. Andrew Wiggins and Dillon Brooks, I don't think are available currently, or like in a serious way. Maybe Wiggins a little bit more than Brooks, but like not in a serious way. And then now we're getting into the Keon Ellis, Ayo Dosunmu, Sadiq Bey, some of the Nets guys, some of the Wizards guys. Like it's not really moving the needle. And so I think we still need some more time for. I think there's a lot of factors where in the East, everyone feels like it's like relatively wide open. So you want to see where you're at 4 weeks from now before making that call. In the West, the play-in mix is still relatively wide open, and you have teams like the Clippers and the Mavericks are both playing better and both getting into that play-in mix. Memphis, I think, is still holding out some hope. So I think you have a lot of delusion right now. Like Memphis has been playing better to their credit, but Portland, like it would be a win for Portland to be a play-in team just for like their culture and what they're trying to build. Utah's going to have to tank at some point. Sacramento and New Orleans are both messes, but New Orleans had been playing better until their recent skid. Clippers have won 4 in a row. Beat the Lakers, beat the Pistons. Mavericks have had some big wins against the Rockets and the Nuggets. And so like, I think right now, the only teams right now that are like for sure sellers are New Orleans, Sacramento, Utah, Indiana, maybe with a bench piece, Washington, Brooklyn, I don't even know if Charlotte for sure is a seller. I think they will inevitably be a seller. Milwaukee's a buyer right now. Then you get into like the Chicago, Atlanta. I think Chicago inevitably goes into the selling route, and then everyone else might be like buyers or at least standing pat. So looking at those teams and like who's realistically available, it's just not a sexy market right now. And I think that's a little concerning if you're the Lakers. So I know you're asking just in general. I think there will be likely a trade between now and January 15th, like maybe a small trade. January 15th, it picks up again because that's when the entire league, unless you've signed an extension and are ineligible to be traded this season, but the entire league is basically trade eligible as of January 15th. So that's when you'll see it pick up going into the deadline. I mean, typically 67, I mean, maybe even higher than that, like 70% of the trades happen like trade week, right? And then you'll have some like the Lakers. I mean, Lakers, you had the DFS trade, you had the Rui trade going back, Rui Kendrick Nunn trade going back a few years now. So Lakers have done some moves before the week of the deadline, but even the Luka trade technically was the week going into the deadline. So I think if we see some more motion with the Lakers, it's probably anything can happen. So I want to be clear on that I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but typically I would say like late January is where things start to heat up. And especially it's just a weird trade market right now, unless there's a Mark Williams who's quietly on the table that we just don't know, right? Like not him specifically, but someone like that. It's just like, I think most of the teams right now are pretty bad and don't have a lot of enticing role players. And then some of the teams that might have those guys are not selling currently. AC Static, thank you for the super chat. I'm not blinking an eye until we get this type of performance for 10 to 15 games. Watch us lose to Detroit. I totally understand this viewpoint, and I'm pretty much on the same wavelength with anyone who views this way. Like I would say one thing I continually harp on is like I'm more of a process over results person. So for me, the process tonight, I weigh the process more than I do the result, right? Like the result's nice. You get a win, you bump up your net rating, you bump up your point differential. But to me, like the focus and the effort, the urgency, being locked into the game plan, running consistent offense in sets and actions for most of the game, that's a testament to the coaching staff. That's also a testament to the players. Several of the guys having as efficient of nights as they had. And then also the team having, again, arguably its best defensive performance in over a month. Those are things that I weigh more. Now, I'm not like, oh, they snapped the losing streak, they're back, right? Like they beat the Kings by 20, they're back. Like, no, I'm not in that mindset, but I am in the mindset of, hey, there was some tangible progress here in this game that I would ideally like to see them stack upon that and do it more consistently. But I also don't want, like, I think, like, two things can be true. We could have some like longer term, big picture concerns with this group, but I think sometimes you got to enjoy life, right? Like you enjoy a win, you like winning is winning. Now, ideally you are winning in a certain manner. You're learning from your wins. You are stacking on your wins. And that's the key here from LA. To your point, if they lay an egg against Detroit and if they lose by 25 to Detroit and just get their ass kicked similar to some of the games they played lately, then that basically wipes all this away. And it just becomes, again, hey, like they can't beat good teams. Like that's kind of the narrative at that point. Right. So, but I want to give them credit for, like, I'll be honest, like there's a version of this where they have like a 4-point win tonight and it's pretty ugly and they got the win, but we're talking about like, hey, why can't this team beat bad teams in a convincing way? Like this wasn't the response we wanted. Like they had a proper response. They came out, they took care of business. There were some bumps along the road, especially early, but I want to give them their proper credit. Jackson, DFS on Houston. Thank you for super chat. DFS on Houston is unfair, so much better than us. I wouldn't say DFS is the guy necessarily who swings it for me. I think it's got to be at the top of the roster where Amen Thompson might just be the best athlete in the NBA. And then Alperen Şengün has developed into, in my opinion, like a borderline top 15 player. And then you have KD, who's already in that top 12 to 15 or so. And then you have Steven Adams, who's an offense unto himself in terms of his offensive rebounding. You have Tari Eason, and Reed Shepherd has really taken a couple of big steps throughout the course of the season. So they're a really good team. I still probably have them third overall. The West is so, like, it's just hard to overlook what San Antonio is doing. Like, I actually think now for me, San Antonio's probably jumped Houston, and it's more of a OKC's number one, unless they're playing San Antonio. I still have Denver number two, and then probably San Antonio number three, but you could probably order Denver, San Antonio, Houston in any order, and I wouldn't really disagree. I just think, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw what Jokic did on Christmas, 56, 15, and 16. They were down 9 in overtime and still won the game. They've beaten Minnesota 3 times this year, who's been like the thorn in their side the last couple of years. I think he has Denver at a different level, in my opinion. But I mean, DFS, like I went through like 7 dudes on Houston, and adding DFS to that, it is now which DFS are they getting is the question. If they're getting Lakers DFS, then yeah, that's a very useful rotation player who elevates them. I think we need more of a sample size to see if they're going to get that player. But for sure, like I agree in a macro sense. I really like the DFS move. And I do wonder longer term, you know, they've gone with the too big look for times, right? And they play a lot of zone. But and Şengün, I think, is held up. Now, there are some concerns, I think, with his rim protection in close games. And that's why I think in part they have that shaky crunch time record or clutch time record. But I think DFS as a small ball player could be a really big piece of what they do. But I think between, Şengün, Jabari Smith, and KD, I didn't even mention Jabari Smith. I love Jabari Smith. That trio is like, I don't know how you don't close with like that front court trio. So, but yeah, DFS is a luxury, and he's a good player. Ryan Lucas, Grimes, Oubre, Drummond, and Eric Gordon for Maxey, Vando, DK in a first. This one's really interesting because I think this is one that I would personally do. I don't know that the Lakers would do it because the question here is like Grimes and his contract situation. If you're giving up a first for Grimes, you probably have to keep him, and he wants to make 20+ million, which is a lot. I think the interesting thing here would actually be I would actually probably start Oubre and bring Grimes off the bench, because I don't love Grimes next to Austin and Luka for like serious minutes. And I think Oubre is overall a more, you could debate who's the better defender, but I think Oubre is better at guarding up and is like a little bit more versatile, where I like Grimes more specifically just against guards, which the Lakers have that need as well. But I also want a guy who could theoretically switch on to wings and hold his own. I thought, especially in the Lakers matchup, we saw the Lakers exploit Grimes' lack of size against Luka and LeBron, though not no team has both of those guys. Most teams don't even have like one guy of course, not anywhere near like Luka's skill level, but even in like that general, that size of a primary scorer playmaker, right? Like there's so few guys even close to that at all. So it's maybe a Lakers specific problem for Grimes. I like this. I will note that I think that the Lakers bar for trading the first continues to be very high. And if it's not a clear cut, like perfect fit or close to ideal fit next to Luka and AR, I'm not sure that they would do that. Or even next to Luka. I think you could convince me of Grimes. Like Grimes could theoretically be Austin insurance to some degree if Austin ends up being traded or leaving or whatever. But there's obviously a big gap there in between those two guys. This one's interesting though. I think you're getting off the Vando contract, which you could also factor in as like part of the cost of. Now it's just tough because Vando's been playing so much better lately. We have to see, can his body hold up, right? Like he's dealt with injuries the last few years. How real is this shooting that he's shown lately? Is it more of a 2-3 week hot streak, or can he reliably be even like a mid 30s 3-point, like 30. If Vando gives you 33, 34% consistently on threes, even on a relatively low volume, like that makes him so much more playable in a postseason context. It's an interesting one. I really like Grimes and Oubre. Drummond gives you that heft that I've talked about at the backup spot where you could go matchup based between Drummond and Hayes. I think this is a very win now move that I don't know that the Lakers would view it the same way that I view it. I'd be very open to this. Again, I have a little skepticism with Grimes and his contract situation and like his fit and ultimately like how much he wants to get paid, but it certainly would improve the roster now, I think. So that's an interesting one. Mamadou, thank you for the super chat. Do you think we will get torched by Detroit with Rui in this lineup? It's a good question. I think torched is strong. I don't know if I would go so far as to say torched, but if we just look at, let's just look at Detroit's starting group right now. So they're starting Jalen Duren, Tobias Harris, Duncan Robinson, Cade Cunningham, and Ausar Thompson. I don't know who Rui's supposed to guard. And you also have to factor in Luka's guarding someone here. LeBron's guarding someone here. So I think the obvious one is you start Ayton on Duren. And then I would start Marcus Smart on Cade Cunningham. Now you have Rui on Tobias Harris, who I guess would be my pick, but I also would want LeBron on Tobias Harris. So that's tough. Or you have him on Duncan Robinson, who's one of the premier movement shooters in the NBA and is flying around floppy actions and dribble handoffs. And like Rui is not a good screen navigator or not good at off ball tracking. So that's like, I mean, let's go back to like what MPJ did against Rui for matchup, with Rui being his primary assignment for a lot of that. Duncan Robinson is not, the highs are not MPJ level, but he can get hot and hit multiple. I mean, he's done that against the Lakers before. And then Ausar Thompson is not Amen Thompson, but he is an elite offensive rebounder for a perimeter player. He's basically as athletic as his brother. He's just not as skilled with the basketball. And I think like a smidge not as good defensively, but that's not a great matchup for Rui either. And then you have to put Luka and LeBron. Like, I think Tobias is the guy I'd maybe you put. God, yeah. Now I'm getting a little nervous for this one because I'm like I don't love these matchups. Tobias is the one guy that he's more of a pick and pop or catch and shoot guy at this stage of his career. So I would love to put Luka, Rui, and LeBron all on Tobias. I don't love any of those guys on Duncan. None of those guys are good off-ball trackers in that sense. And then Ausar is just pure energy and verve and athleticism. And yeah, I don't love the starting matchups, to be completely honest. I think it changes a lot. If you have Vando out there, then I actually think you might go Vando on Cade. Then I would maybe go Marcus Smart on Duncan Robinson. Then, I mean, you still have, I guess you go LeBron on Tobias and Rui on Ausar Thompson. Rui's out. I guess you go Luka and just have Luka help off and be a helper and box out as best he can. And then LeBron is also selectively helping off of Tobias. I don't love these starting matchups. Then you get into their bench with Stewart and Holland and Green and LeVert and Ivy. But yeah, I mean, that starting group, torched is strong, but if they keep Rui in there, I think there's some real matchup problems for LA in terms of their three perimeter guys can't all guard Tobias Harris. So someone's going to have to track Duncan Robinson around screens and dribble handoffs. Someone's going to have to stick with Ausar Thompson on cuts and offensive rebounding and like the motor energy plays. I mean, do you put one of those guys? Do you put Rui on Cade and then put Marcus on Ausar Thompson or Duncan Rob? Like, I don't really know what you do. That's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. So I think they will probably lose the starting minutes if Rui's out there. Maybe it's like -5, -7, -8, like relatively close. But I do think I really don't like their defensive matchups for that matchup. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Switch everything doesn't work on Luka and AR led team. Both are bad defenders, and make them defend 1v1 will drain their energy and being in foul trouble. I don't disagree. I mean, again, to go back, because I think you're making the point about the system. I was not saying the system's working, because the Lakers have been a bottom 3 defense for half the season, or more than half. It was a 15-game stretch as the 28th ranked defense. So I agree that the system is not working, but I just wanted to more point out there is a system to some degree here. But yeah, I mean, the issue, I think one element with the Lakers defense that they don't use or deploy enough is like pre-switching and scram switching. I think they do it here and there, and maybe they'll do it a little bit more in like a close game in when it like really matters. But that is something that also requires a certain amount of energy, right? Like for the guy to, like a guy has to rotate. Let's just say it's like someone in an ISO at the top of the key. Someone has to rotate over, tag that guy. Then likely the corner guy has to shift up and be ready. I mean, really be ready for either pass to the wing or the corner, depending on how long it takes that guy to recover back. But ideally, if you're looking at it almost like just generally speaking, let's say there's like a guy at the top of the arc, a guy on the wing, and a guy in the corner. You're obviously going to have like a guy on each player, but let's say the wing defender is the better defender. You're going to have that guy slide over and tag that guy. Then you're going to have the corner guy come up to replace the wing guy. And then you're going to have the guy who you're trying to get out of the action rotate back to the corner. So Lakers could do that more. My biggest gripe with their defensive system is just letting guys die in isolation. They do this continually, where it's like they want to pick on Luka. Okay, let Luka dance one-on-one. They want to pick on Rui, let him dance. They want to don't really pick on LeBron. They want to pick on Austin, want to pick on Gabe. Let them just play one-on-one and try to force them into a contested jumper. But against the very best teams, and especially against teams with big wing scorers, they just shoot over that player. And we saw it with Kevin Durant. We've seen it with Brandon Ingram. We've seen it with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Like anyone of that ilk who has, 6'7" and above that could shoot off the dribble, especially in the mid-range, they just cook the Lakers, because the Lakers are going to put a 6'3" player on them and just say, hey, Gabe, try to contest Kevin Durant and live off of that. So that's my biggest gripe with the defensive system. The alternative is like, if you're playing drop, and it's, then there's a whole element of can Austin, and they do play drop when it's like 1-5 pick and roll, but or one of the perimeter guys plus Ayton. It depends who it is. If it's Rui and LeBron, they'll switch it. Sometimes with Luka, they'll switch it. But with Austin, they tend to play more drop. The issue then is like Austin has to get around the screen. He has to rear view contest. He has to not give up space or let that guy get downhill. And that's been a challenge for them as well. So they're just in a tough spot with the starting group. And that's why I continue to say, like, in general, especially with Austin out, I think it becomes very clear the 2 stars, 2 Banshees, and a center. You do that, I think that group has way better balance. And even if you don't want to start Vando because you're so concerned about the spacing with Vando and Ayton, which I get to a degree, then start Jake. And at least Jake is like more of a threat than Vando is in terms of how teams guard him. And that's just a better balance. But the fact that they continue to switch everything with guys who can't really switch everything, that continues to be the issue defensively, or one of many. And then Kevin follows up, and JJ's offense mostly dependent on Luka, and AR doesn't make sense to have their energy drain on defense. He needs to find a way to hide them. The issue right now is the Lakers are frankly trying to hide 4 of their 5 starting defenders, right? Like LeBron and Luka should not be primary defenders. Austin should not be a primary defender, and Rui should not be a primary defender. And we've seen the limitations of Austin holds up fairly well in some matchups, doesn't hold up well in others. Rui pretty much is at a disadvantage unless he's playing up and guarding a big. Like when Rui was playing the 4 before LeBron came back, he looked better defensively. The second LeBron came back and shifted Rui to the 3, Rui can't guard a Brandon Ingram or a Kevin Durant or a DeMar DeRozan, who's even slower than those guys and smaller. He still can't guard him with the footwork and the handle. And it's not Rui's fault. It's just like Rui can't do that. And they're asking him to do something he can't do. And the definition of insanity is asking a player to do the same thing over and over again when they can't. And yet that's exactly what they continue to do. But to your point, with Luka and AR, this is why I felt their minutes should have been slashed earlier in the season, despite if it costs you a game or your margin of victory is a little bit lower, that's okay, because you need to keep these guys relatively fresh. And there's a reason why one of the big trends league-wide that I don't think has been talked about as much, minutes are down. A lot of players and starters are playing fewer minutes. And I think that's its own way of load management, of instead of sitting out back-to-backs or sitting out certain stretches, it's like, well, let's just play you 32 minutes instead of 34 or 35 and save some, shave off some minutes that way and save some workload. The Lakers have not done that, and they haven't really had the ability to, because they've been in so many dogfights all season. But yeah, I mean, I agree that they need to hide Luka and AR. It's just when they're playing the Spurs, where are they hiding Luka and AR? Right? You can't hide everyone on Harrison Barnes. That would, like, if you were just factoring in like each individual defender, LeBron's best matchup would be Harrison Barnes. Rui's best matchup would be Harrison Barnes. Luka's best matchup would be Harrison Barnes. They can't all guard him, right? Someone has to guard De'Aaron Fox. That has to be Austin. Someone has to guard Stephon Castle. That's Rui. Like, I don't know. They're in a tough spot with that, right? But I agree in general. They don't have the defensive personnel, and they're certainly not starting the defensive personnel to hide those guys. And then next one from Keon Park. Just a heads up, going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes here and then wrap. Do you think Luka can be a more efficient player long term? I missed the game and just saw a box score in 14 attempts, yet 35% from 3 and 7 assists, 5 turnovers. I do think Luka can be a more efficient player longer term. And if you look at earlier in the season, he was a more efficient player. I'm about to pull up his splits right now, or his game logs rather. If you look at pre Slovenia trip or pre that absence, Luka was averaging 35, 9 and 9, shooting 48% from the floor, 34% on threes on 11 attempts per game, 60% on twos, 12 free throws a game, 81% at the free throw line, taking about 23 shots. Okay, I'm going to try and remember all those numbers. Looking at the last, so I don't have the latest game inputted, but going into tonight, he was averaging 29 points. So that was down from 29 and a half, down from the 35, 7 rebounds down from the 9, 8 assists down from the 9, shooting 41%. So down from the 48, 22 shots a game. So that's about 1 fewer. 9.5 threes per game in terms of attempts. So that was actually lower, almost by a 3.5, but only shooting 26% on those threes. So that's a big gap big decline from 34 to 26. And then shooting 77% at the free throw line, 12 free throws again. So basically been the same before and after. But clearly, I didn't look at the turnovers. He's averaging 4.2. What was he averaging before? He was averaging 4.3. So his turnovers have actually been down. I know they've been like up a little bit lately. He had 6 against Houston, the 5 tonight. I think that the biggest difference has been the assists have been down lately, and that brings the assist to turnover ratio, technically closer, right? Like that's just basic math of how it works. But yeah, I mean, I think Luka's trending in the right direction generally. I mean, again, like the Philly game was rough from a shooting performance. The first Phoenix game or second on the season, first that he played in of the last 2 was rough. The Clippers game was rough, and the Houston game, rough start, much better like second quarter until his injury, or not his injury. But the game got out of hand, and then eventually he didn't play as much. Although he also was grimacing, so I don't know what he was going through. Yeah, I mean, I would say 3 of the past 7 games, he has been pretty subpar from an efficiency perspective in terms of his shooting. Turnovers, 5, 6, 6, and 5. So yeah, 4 of the 7, he's been a little too high. So yeah, I mean, he just hasn't been the same player since returning. I think he's also been dealing with this calf situation to some degree. But I think the efficiency will bounce back, maybe not quite as high as it was earlier in the season. I mean, he started the season shooting nearly 70% on twos, which for such a high usage perimeter score, that's like unheard of, right? So that was inevitably going to come down to some degree. But looking again, so he's down from 60% pre-absence to 53%. And again, some of these numbers are skewed without tonight's performance, so that will obviously impact his shooting percentage, both from the field and from 3. It will bump up his turnovers. So his turnovers are probably slightly higher off of tonight's game. But I'm not worried about Luka. I know there's been a lot going on with the Luka stands, the LeBron stands, the battle. I get it. I'm not going to wade into those waters because I understand both sides to a degree, but I also understand the counterpoints to both sides to a degree. And like I don't really want to litigate that, but I think Luka is going to be fine. I think like it's been 7 games in overall. I mean, we're going on 3 weeks here, but he's also been a bit banged up during that. I want to give him a little bit more time. Let's see where he's at, like 10 to 15 games back. And then if he's still in the same place, then it's a different conversation at that point. Keon Park. So Luka's stamina died within 2 to 3 months at age 26. I don't know if that's, if that was the takeaway from what I said. I hope not. I don't think that's not what I'm saying. I think he is not, for whatever reason, from that week off, came out and especially right away with like the Philly game. Then even the San Antonio game was not a good performance. Then the Phoenix game, then the Utah game was, I thought, his bounce back. And then he had the Clippers game, got injured, then missed the game, came back at he's not been playing well by his standards, right? Like the counting stats are still there, but the efficiency's not been there. The turnovers, again, I think factoring in tonight have been a little bit higher, but I'm not. Yeah, I mean, to this point, I don't think Luka's conditioning died or stamina died in 2 to 3 months. I think Luka's going to be fine. I just think he's going through a little bit of a rough patch again by his standards, right? Because dude is still averaging 37 and 8. It's pretty high standards to be clear. Like I thought before this absence, he was clearly a top 3 player playing at a top 3 level. I don't think he has been playing at a top 3 level since returning, but I think he will get back there at some point here in the next couple of weeks. Cage Britt, thank you for the super chat. Interested on your take on Lakers Collective about making current moves for the future. Would you be interested in Gabe and Maxey for Pat Will if we are getting 3 or 4 seconds? That is interesting. I'd be interested in this if the Lakers had an appetite to then make a subsequent move to upgrade the roster, right? Because you could still do something like, for example, if you did Pat Williams with Gabe and Maxey for Pat Williams, you're saving some money, but you're saving some money this season. You're taking on longer term money with Patrick Williams. But if you're getting those seconds, can you then turn around and say, hey, Sacramento, we will give you Dalton Connect and 3 seconds for Keon Ellis. And now you've reshaped the rotation. Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton. Only one of those players is like a core rotation player in JJ's primary rotation. And I would argue the weakest and like most non-essential rotation piece in Gabe. You take that player out, you add in Pat Williams, and you add in Keon Ellis. That's just now there's no excuse not to have, again, with the starters, you're still going to lean Luka, Austin, LeBron, but outside of the starting group or like that trio playing together, every other second of the game, you should have at least 2 Banshees on the floor and some combination of Marcus, Vando, Jake, Patrick Williams, and Keon Ellis. You could have at least 2 of those guys in most lineups, and sometimes even 3 or 4 is pushing it maybe a little bit, but like you could have a lot of lineups with 3 of those guys. And if it's like center, 3 of those dudes and Luka, for example, like Luka, Keon Ellis, Patrick Williams, Vando, Jackson Hayes, something like that as like a bench group. I love that lineup. And you've got multi-positional defenders. You got shooting. You got Luka and Hayes as the bread and butter, pick and roll tandem. Like that's, and then you have your other groups with LeBron and Austin, and then a couple guys around those 2, plus maybe DeAndre Ayton or whatever. You're cooking with something there. So I like that type of move. Now I will note, I'm not a big fan of Pat Williams' contract. And I think we are entering a really weird phase of roster building where it's sort of, you want like the high level stars and starters and like a certain caliber of player. Okay, I'll pay them 20 plus million. And then everyone else is basically the exceptions and like minimum contracts. And of course, you know, you got like the rookie scale guys, but it's just hard. Like the middle class is getting squeezed in the new CBA. I think that's one of the unfortunate outcomes, or at least unfortunate to like the mass of NBA players, is that I think we are headed toward a system that it's sort of like you're either a starter or star and you're getting paid a certain amount, or you're in this like, yeah, I think the gap between the average player, like the average player salary is going to go up because of the salary cap, because of the TV contract. But if we're actually accounting for like the range of player salary, I think it's going to be like 70% of players are probably making even more, or that might be low, like 80%, 85% might be making like under the average contract number. And then the 10 to 15% are, I don't know, 20 to 25% are making above that, and like 70, 75 are below that. And there's just going to be a really big gap. And what you don't really want in the new CBA is some of these like tricky middle contracts. I do think Pat Williams is in that range where he's making 18 million for the next couple of years. And I just feel like that's a little too high. I think if he was a free agent, I always like to play the game of like, if they were a free agent, what contract would they get, right? And if Pat Williams was a free agent, I think he's probably at most a full non-taxpayer MLE guy, but maybe probably because of his skill set, a full non-taxpayer MLE guy. But there is some real concern with some of his prior performance, prior injuries. So you could say he's worth like 10 million a year. You could say he's worth 15 million a year, but somewhere in that range, that's okay. 18, once you're above the non-taxpayer MLE range, that's where I think it's a little bit too rich for my blood. Now, if you're getting 3 to 4 seconds and can flip that for Keon Ellis, I'm open to that. I just, it's a little tricky. All right. I'm going to take a couple more questions in the chat and then wrap. Saving Soul says, I got the Lakers as the 10th seed at the end of the season. Where are you guys at? I am not there. I think I will say, we haven't even talked about the Austin absence, and that had been one of my initial takeaways I wanted to touch on, but I just felt tonight was not the night to evaluate what this group looks like without Austin. I touched on it a little bit with the rotation and with some of the usage, but I want to see what it looks like against Detroit. Like that's a real test of what this group will look like without Austin. But I think right now, if the Lakers do not make a move, I probably have them as the 5th or 6th seed, depending on when Austin comes back, injury luck the rest of the way. Because like right now, I think no Austin, no Jackson, no Gabe. You are at a delicate point with your rotation. You lose another guy, like you lose Vando, you lose Marcus, you lose Jake, you lose Rui, like any of these other like wing perimeter guys, you're in a really tough spot. So assuming like relatively normal injury luck, I probably would bump them to 5th or 6th right now in terms of just overall standings. And a part of that is, I also think Austin's probably going to be out more than 4 weeks. I think that's not really being discussed, but I think it will probably be more in the 5 to 6 week range. But too early to tell on that. It's just the average time missed for a player with that injury is 40 days, which is closer to like 5.5 weeks than 4 weeks. So with that, I do think the Lakers probably lose at least a couple games that they would have won had Austin been available. But I would say probably 5th or 6th right now. If they make a trade, if they do the Herb Jones trade, if they do the Andrew Wiggins trade, if they trade for someone we don't see coming, but that is that caliber of player, I think they can get back up into 4th. I think already we're starting to see a bit of separation where like Denver's without 3 starters right now. They continue. I think they just recently, they might have just recently, they just lost, but they've still been, they blew the Orlando game. They've been winning in general though. Like they're 7-3 over their past 10. San Antonio's 8-2 over their past 10. So those two teams are playing at a level where I think there is going to be a bit of a gap between those two in LA. I think Houston's maybe the team that LA could catch, but I think LA right now for me is probably in the 4 to 6 range, but I would lean 5 or 6 if they don't make a move. Connor Phillips, do you think it's more likely that we're active at the deadline or that we stand pat and make all of our moves this offseason? I mean, this is basically comes back to, do I think the Lakers are going to make a trade or not? I think I'd said previously like 60% likelihood, something like that. I'm probably bumping it down to 55% right now just because it really depends on which way the season goes, right? Like the season has not been trending in the right direction for a month, and I'm not going to all of a sudden say that the season is trending in the right direction after a blowout of the Sacramento Kings. So I would like to see like how do things go? Like looking at the schedule coming up, you got Detroit, Memphis, and Memphis twice in a row, which it's always tough to play a team twice in a row, regardless of if you're home, regardless of the caliber of team. And like Memphis is decent. Lakers have already beaten them. They should beat them both those games, but like it is tough to do. Then they go at New Orleans, at San Antonio. They get the gift of going to San Antonio on the second night of a back-to-back. And a New Orleans team that's been playing better, Lakers have already beaten them a couple times this season. But yeah, I mean, this is a stretch where like, just look at the next 5: Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, San Antonio. I think the goal should be at least 3-2, but 2 and 3 is also in play. I mean, 4 and 1's in play. I think the Detroit and San Antonio games are going to be really tough. But I mean, if they can beat Memphis twice and New Orleans and at least go 3-2, I think that gives me a little bit more confidence of them like treading water. But if they go 2 and 3 or 1 and 4, obviously the spiral continues at that point. So I think it does depend to some degree on where things go from here. If the team somehow falls to like 6th or in the play-in mix somehow, I don't think that's going to happen, to be clear, but let's just say for argument's sake, I think that certainly lowers the likelihood they make a move. I think the likelihood they were making a move was in part based on things are looking really good. They're top 2 or 3 seed in the West, and like, let's invest in this further. If they slide, that's where it's like, is it worth it for the 6th or 7th seed? I don't know. But I also think it depends on the market. It depends on the price. I think there's a lot of context that goes into this that it's just difficult right now to say. I think in general, it's going to be tough for them to make a big move based on their assets and based on the current market. So I would say, like, even if we're talking about a 55, 60% chance of them making a move in general, that still is probably a medium to small move and not like a quote unquote big move, depending on, like, Herb Jones is kind of a borderline big move, I would say. Andrew Wiggins, same thing. I would say that those are more like medium, maybe medium big moves, medium large. But yeah, so I would still say it's more likely than not, but it really depends on where things go in the next month. Rules Ivy says, nah, Jovan, you contradict yourself. You're not a Cam Thomas guy, but he'd come off the bench on a good team, bro. Awesome, come off the bench on a good team. LOL, Lakers should at least trade for Trey Murphy. If you think Austin and Cam Thomas are similar caliber of players, then we just view things very differently. I don't feel the need to expand upon that. And like, for as bad as Austin can be defensively, there is an element of Austin being a team defender, Austin having an attention to detail. And I think that's shown by, I don't know if I haven't checked the last couple games, but as recently as a couple of games, Austin was leading the league in charges. Like Austin, yes, he can be blown by. Yes, he can be overpowered, but Austin is trying despite his physical limitations. And he has been a good defender in a team context in terms of helping and rotating and making the right moves within LA's system. The same cannot be said for Cam Thomas. And then there is a Grand Canyon sized gulf between those two in terms of their passing and playmaking. Austin is at a much higher level in terms of his passing. I do not think that is comparable. So I think there's two pretty big gaps between them in just those two skills. So we could debate whether like where Austin should be slotted and where he should be on a good team. But I'll say this, like Austin earlier in the season, when Austin was playing his basketball, the Lakers were winning a lot of undermanned games. There were times where you could compare the guys out there to a Nets level team that the Nets are not winning a lot of those games with Cam Thomas going off, right? So I just think Austin impacts winning at a totally different level than Cam Thomas. If I do not think they're the same player archetype at all, but I mean, some people saying Cam is a better scorer. I mean, if you want to argue that, sure. But there's way more to the game than just that. V Deadly, what are the odds? I've been saying like 55, 60%, but it's in flux. Kane Carter, I don't see your question. Or it says, hey, Jovan, after Denver held their GM and coach to the fire, why couldn't they do that for Rob, especially after 2022? Anywhere else he would get fired? Is it because Jeannie views him as family, not even demoted? I don't really want to get too much into the Rob situation right now, but I will say this. I think, so one, let's start from the beginning, right? So he does, right after he takes over or around there about pretty much right after, they do the AD trade, then they win the title, then they do the Russ trade, which, so like winning the title as a GM, like things went off the rails with Denver after winning it in 2023, clearly after they cleaned house. That was a very toxic situation where clearly ownership was blaming it both on the coach and the GM. But you do get a bit of a leeway. Like you win a title, you get 2 to 3 years after that. Like that's just how it works. So he gets that. Then he gets the Russ trade, but then that kind of gets put on. Honestly, LeBron and Clutch kind of get blamed publicly, at least for that more. At least that was like the fan reaction more than even the Lakers. So he kind of skates out of that one. But then they also put it on Frank Vogel because they end up firing Frank Vogel, and then you get a new coach, you get a little bit more time to see like where that goes. Then the Darvin situation, they go to the Western Conference Finals in the first year, so that you go to the conference finals, like that buys you a little bit of time as well. Then that goes off the rails. They end up firing him, hiring JJ, and now it's about like long term and JJ and being the face of the franchise and all that stuff. And then, of course, midway through that season, he pulls off the Luka trade. So it does feel like he's made some big moves or had some big wins in like there will be a bit of a gap there where we're maybe critical of the performance or we're like, where are the results here, but where's the action? And then something happens, right? So I think if you kind of look at his tenure, you could go AD trade, championship, Russ trade, which then bought some time to see where that was going to go. Then like Vogel, then Darvin, then conference finals, then it goes off the rails, then JJ, then Luka trade, and then now we're here. So feels like he's kind of been able to stretch it out where he makes a big move or a big win at the right time, like right when it's kind of been a bit of a gap. So I think that's certainly bought him some time, but I mean, both these guys got extended. So I know people are upset with JJ. I know people are upset with Rob. I understand the criticism of both, to be completely transparent and to be completely clear, but they are not going from getting extended both this year to being out at the end of this year. That's just not happening. So I think for either person, the earliest would have to be like next season if things like really went off the rails. But I think they're both there for at least a couple more years. And again, as I quoted the other day, Dave McMenamin was on Alan Sliwa's show, and he said the next 5 years for Jeannie, Rob, and JJ. So that's what he's heard. That's what's out there. Then 5 years for those, two. So I would say at least 2 years, but we'll see from there. But I'm going to wrap here. I ended up going a little bit longer than expected, but appreciate you guys. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with Lakers Collective. Let me make sure I didn't. Okay, here's I missed the super chat. Thank you, Tan Man. Austin for Keontae George from Utah. That's a really interesting one. I think both sides say no because Austin fits the Luka timeline a little bit better. And if you're Utah, I mean, those Austin Reaves Utah Jazz jerseys would fly off the shelves. So let me tell you that. But yeah, I don't know if it makes sense really for either side just because of where each side is at. Like the Lakers are not fully in win now mode, but they are like, they want to win now, right? And Austin is better than Keontae right now and fits into a winning environment better than, like, he's more battle tested. He's been in the playoffs before, etc. Keontae needs some seasoning, and that's just going to come with more time and reps and experience. And like, let's see where Keontae's at a couple years from now. Unfortunately for him, he might not like make the playoffs the next couple years just because of Utah's situation, but he needs more reps, I think. But it is an interesting trade, and you could talk yourself into like either side. I really like Keontae George. I don't know if what his ceiling is though, and if I were the Lakers and we're considering this trade, it would be more so to like buy time and potential of like what he could be and sort of resetting some of the clock a little bit with the core. But even then, like, I don't know if Keontae, like, is Keontae better than Austin is right now, like in 2 or 3 years? I don't know the answer to that. And then again, from the Utah side, it feels like it's similar to the Laurie thing where like Laurie doesn't really fit their timeline, but they're kind of trying to make it work. I guess if you added Austin, that does like supercharge their timeline a little bit, but it's still like, I feel like they need more guys in their early to mid 20s, not Austin's 27, going to be 28. I just think that's a little bit too advanced for like the core of what Utah's building. It feels like he would be out of sorts with like Kessler and Bailey and Collier and some of the other guys that they have. So I think both sides say no, but it is a very interesting trade. But with all that said, I am wrapping here. Appreciate you all. Again, back tomorrow, 10 a.m., Lakers Collective. Then I'll be doing Spectrum Sportsnet later in the day. So that'll be airing tomorrow evening. So we'll not have a show, have a bit of a crazy day tomorrow, but I will be back Tuesday post Lakers Pistons, and then potentially Wednesday, if not Wednesday, Wednesday or Thursday. But appreciate you, and I will talk to you all very soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to the chat.